This week's parsha, Acharei Mot-Kedoshim, begins talking about Yom Kippur. It's very strange to talk about Yom Kippur in the middle of Sfiras HaOmer, but at risk of seeming out of step with the times, I'll talk a little bit about Yom Kippur. And if you look at the parsha, which talks about the sacrifices that were brought, the service in the temple, there was one outstanding feature. The most noteworthy aspect of the avodah, the entire temple service, is the fact that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would enter the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the innermost, holiest section of the temple. He would go in, he would go in 4 times. 4 times he would go in, come out, and this is really the most noteworthy aspect of this avodah. And it's very interesting because really the Torah warns us that this is prohibited. As a priest is not allowed to enter this chamber. This is the most holy place. It's off limits to everybody. But once a year on Yom Kippur, the high priest is allowed to enter. So we have to understand what's the significance of that. That the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which normally is off limits, here on Yom Kippur the Kohen Gadol enters. Now it's interesting, the Medrash tells us, at least this is how the Vilna Gaon understands the Medrash, that Aaron, the first high priest, was allowed to go in anytime he wanted, as long as he performed all the korbanos. So this avodah, which we associate with Yom Kippur, Aaron could perform any time of the year. Perhaps that's why it's appropriate to talk about it now, because really Aaron could have gone into the Kodesh HaKadoshim even in the spring. And as long as he performed these korbanos, these rituals, Aaron was allowed to go in any time. For eternity, it's only once a year on Yom Kippur. But it seems that these sacrifices are not so much connected to Yom Kippur as they are connected to going into the Holy of Holies. In other words, you want to go into the Holy of Holies, it has to be with these accompanying sacrifices. Normally, the high priest only can go in on Yom Kippur, and therefore he only brings the sacrifices on Yom Kippur. Aaron, since he was allowed to go into the Holy of Holies anytime he wanted, he could bring these sacrifices even not on Yom Kippur. So it comes out that the entire ritual, all the aspects, the sacrifices and the sprinkling of the blood and the offering of the incense, is not so much connected to Yom Kippur as it's connected to going into the Holy of Holies. That's the main thing. You want to go into the Holy of Holies, this is the procedure. So, as a rule, it's Yom Kippur. For Aaron, it could be any time. So what is special about going to the Holy of Holies? I think that there are really 2 aspects to it. The first, and perhaps the most important, is a lesson as to the very nature of tshuva. As we know, Yom Kippur is a time of tshuva. It's a time of self-improvement. And how does one change? How does one advance spiritually? Let me bring it out this way. Because we have a parsha in the Torah, which is the parsha of the Nazir. The Nazir is a person who makes a vow of sanctity, which necessitates that he give up certain things. He can't drink wine, he can't attend the funeral, he can't defile himself to the dead, he's not allowed to cut his hair. But these are all aspects of the vow of Nazirus. Nazirus is a vow of sanctity. Kadosh Yiyeh, the Nazir is the holy person. In accordance with his holy state, these are the things he can't do. Why does a person become a Nazir? What motivates a person to become a Nazir? So the Torah juxtaposes the parsha of Nazir to the parsha of Sota, to the parsha of the suspected adulteress. So Chazal tell us that Kol Haraya Saita V'Kula, if you see the Sota in her shame and her degradation, Yazer Atzma Yain, you should make a vow and swear off wine. And the simple explanation is, because how did it come to pass that this woman should commit adultery, be disloyal to her husband? It must be she was under the influence of alcohol. She drank. And therefore she lost control. So you see the dangers of alcohol. So if you see the sota b'kavula, and you tell yourself there, but for the grace of God go I, you have to take precautions, and you also swear off wine. That's the simple explanation. But it doesn't seem to be adequate, because if the problem is losing control under the influence of alcohol, it would be enough to make a vow not to drink alcohol. You wouldn't have to become a nazir. A nazir entails so much more. Not going to a funeral and not cutting one's hair and ultimately bringing sacrifices upon the completion of the vow. If the issue is alcohol, so don't drink wine. That's it. Make a vow. I'm not going to drink wine. Not going to drink alcohol. Now you're safe. You'll always be in control. But why is it necessary to become a nazir? To become a holy person? I think the idea is a little different. Let me give a mashal to explain it. You have a child sitting in a high chair, and the child, toddler, 2-year-old, and the toddler sticks his spoon in his oatmeal and flings it across the room. As distressing and as upsetting as that is to parents, the parents know that this is par for the course. This is a perfectly appropriate behavior for a 2-year-old. Perfectly normal. To be expected. In reality, the 2-year-old is doing science when he does that. He's experimenting with his environment, cause effect. So perfectly expected. But by the time the young man is 5, you expect that he should outgrow this. It's something which is age appropriate for a 2-year-old, but once you're 5, you're not tempted to do that under normal circumstances. You're beyond that. You're above that. It's a very interesting thing that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, held that you should not make a big deal about disciplining children regarding things that they are certainly going to outgrow sooner or later. Very, very fascinating thing. Listen to this story. That once, Rabbi Yaakov was a great Talmud Chacham, great tzaddik, and people used to come to him for brachas. So once a father brought his 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, for a bracha. And so the father brings this little young man in, and Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was one of the Gedolei Hador, one of the Ziknei Hador, one of the elders, puts out his hand to shake the young boy's hand. And the young boy, no, I'm not shaking his hand. Not shaking his hand. So the father gets upset. The father says, give the rub of your hand. No, not giving me my hand. Just giving me, no, not giving me my hand. So the father is about to do something, maybe whack the kid, who knows what he's going to do. And Rabbi Yaakov says, don't make a fuss. The time will come that he'll want to shake my hand. In other words, you don't have to make a big deal about something that the child is going to outgrow sooner or later anyway. He's a 4-year-old, he's entitled to his mishigasna, so to speak. Sooner or later he'll outgrow it. That's not where you make an issue. That's an interesting perspective on child rearing. But in any case, this is a fact, that certain behaviors we outgrow. Growth isn't only a function of age. The more we learn, the more we develop, the more we elevate ourselves, we find the things that once upon a time were totally appropriate, we've outgrown, we've transcended, we're beyond that. It's beneath us. It's beneath our dignity to engage in such things. Now you have this man. The man sees the sota. He sees a woman who's gone astray, who's broken her commitments, all for the sake of a momentary, fleeting excitement. And he says, I might be tempted in the same way. What's the solution? The solution is he has to raise himself to a higher level of spirituality. He has to raise himself to a level where that type of behavior will be beneath him. That's not the kind of thing he could even contemplate doing. It's just I would never do a thing like that. I'm above that. I'm beyond that. That's what Chazal are telling us. It's not just a question of alcohol. That would be a band-aid solution. Now, as you suspect, you'll be tempted because you lose control, so don't drink wine. I mean, it may have some merit, but that's not really addressing the problem. The problem really is, could I really sink so low? Could I do something which is so shameful, so despicable, so coarse? The answer is you have to raise yourself. You become a nazi, you become a holy person. You elevate yourself to the point where those things aren't tempting anymore. You know, a person comes to shul, and he's very tempted to talk to his neighbors, to carry on a conversation, to socialize. But the more the person learns about davening, the more the person understands the tefillah, the more the person engages in tefillah, the less tempting it is. You know, I don't want to be boastful, but I don't consider this boastful. But I'll tell you the truth, that I really, when I come to shul, I really have no interest at all in having a conversation with anybody. You know, it's just, you know, Baruch Hashem, I'm beyond that already. You know, it just, to the point that the contrary, people want to talk to me, I find it irritating. I mean, I'd love to talk to you, you know, any other place, any other time. But that's not what we're here for now. And the more you learn about davening, and the more you actively daven, and the more you think about davening, and the more you make it an important part of your life, you outgrow that desire to want to socialize and have a good time with your pals and neighbors in shul. You know, it's beyond that. It's just, I don't, and it's not something which is a tremendous act of piety or self-discipline. It's just that, you know, this isn't the place, this isn't the time. Why would I want to do something like that? It's just so inappropriate for what I'm really here for. That's the idea. We have to elevate ourselves. Yom Kippur, of course, is a time of tshuva. And it's a time for self-improvement. We all have to change in one way or another. Everybody needs to improve. How do you improve? You improve by elevating yourself to a place where you've never been. A place where you can't imagine being. Symbolically, that's the Kohen Gadol going to the Holy of Holies. This is a place which is beyond the norm. This is beyond his regular level. He goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he takes us all with him. We are raised to a higher level. At that level, all the things we've done, all the averis, all the pettiness is beneath us. The Rosh and Maseches Yuma brings a medrash from the Pirkei of Rabbi Eliezer that the Satan himself, the accusing angel, the prosecuting angel, comes before the Ribono Shel Olam on Yom Kippur and says that, you know, there's no people like the Jewish people. They are literally like angels. On Yom Kippur, they are like angels. And the Medrash lists a whole number of ways in which we are like angels in Yom Kippur. We don't eat like angels, we don't drink like angels, we wear white clothes like angels, we stand. Angels don't have knees. The pasuk says in Yechezkel, so they always stand. They're never sitting. Because they're always on duty, so they never take a break. So they always stand. You don't have to sit, you don't need knees. So in Yom Kippur we also stand a lot. Some people stand the whole day. So we're like angels. One of the interesting things that it says is that there is no discord. There is no conflict on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, everyone is at peace with one another. That's why we have a custom the day before Yom Kippur to ask forgiveness of one another. Just like the angels are at peace. So, Oseh Shalom B'Roma, God makes peace on high. So, Yom Kippur, we're all at peace. Tremendous day of harmony and friendship, contentment. Yom Kippur. So, what is the idea of being an angel? What's the point of being an angel for a day? The idea is, if you elevate yourself even for a day to the level of an angel, then you leave a lot of lowly things behind. So even though it's inevitable, you're going to have to come down. You can't be an angel forever. But the experience of having been an angel, even for a day, makes a big difference in the long run in a person's life. That's the idea of Yom Kippur. And that's symbolized by the Kohen Gadol going to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's not just symbolic. Now here we're going to get into something which is a little controversial. In the, I don't mean, this is not on the front page of the newspaper, I don't mean that. But in Jewish thought, this is a controversial issue. Because we know that with the advent of Hasidus, there became a very, very controversial issue as to what the relationship is between the tzaddik and his followers, the Rebbe and his Hasidim. It's a very, very interesting thing, a little bit in the history of Hasidus, that the leaders of Russian Hasidus, Reb Mendel of Vitebsk and Ron Kalisker, moved to Eretz Yisrael. And the question was, who would be their successor? Who would be the leader of Hasidim in Russia? And there really were two great Hasidic Rebbes. There was the Balatanya, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and there was Shlomo Karliner, great Hasidic masters. And one of them was in line to be the leader of Hasidim in Russia. And according to the story, the Balatanya was willing to accept Reb Shlomo Karliner. You may never have heard of, but he's going to accept Shlomo Karliner, except there were certain conditions that he had. He said, if you accept these conditions, then we can talk business. But otherwise, I can't accept your leadership. One of the issues was this, and I saw it put this way in the Sefer, whether does the tzaddik lift the sheep, or does the tzaddik lead the sheep? The Balatanya held that the role of the tzaddik, the role of the Rebbe, is to lead. You lead by example, you lead through instruction, but the avoda has to be done, the work has to be done by the followers themselves. In other words, the Rebbe can't daven for you, and the Rebbe can't learn for you, and the Rebbe can't do mitzvahs for you. He can instruct you, he can guide you, he can inspire you. But ultimately, you're on your own. It's not that the Rebbe has to serve the Ribono Shel Olam and everyone else can just hang on to his coattails. Every person has to serve the Ribono Shel Olam in his own right. Every person has to learn and understand and do. The Rebbe is a role model. The Rebbe is a teacher. So the tzaddik is manhig es hatzon. He leads the sheep. Reb Shlomo Karliner held that the tzaddik is nosi es hatzon. He carries the sheep. That in some ways, the avoda of the tzaddik enables the tzaddik to lift his followers by their coattails. And if you study the early history of Hasidus, you'll see that this issue, the two alternatives, really are very, very, very great issues in Hasidus, and really define the different Hasidic groups. Whereas in one group it was more the one way, other group it's more the other way. And the question is this, the question is, we are accustomed to seeing things the Balatanya's way. Because we see Judaism as a participatory religion. Right? The rabbi doesn't do mitzvahs for us. Maybe in non-Orthodox segments of the religion it might be that way. But in Orthodoxy we don't think of the rabbi as doing things for us. He teaches us, he instructs us, he guides us, he answers our questions. But really, we all have to daven ourselves, and we all have to do mitzvahs ourselves. So we tend to think of Judaism as being a participatory religion where everybody carries his own weight. But we have to face up to the fact that, to a certain extent, that is only after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. When we had a Beis HaMikdash, there was a Kohen who performed certain avoda, certain functions for the entire tzibur, which members of the tzibur could not perform. So we don't have these sacramental functions today. But when we had a Beis HaMikdash, we did. And the Kohen performed the korbanos for the entire tzibur. So the entire tzibur benefited from these korbanos. There was a kapara, there was an atonement, there was a connection to God that was created, but it was performed by the Kohen for everybody else. To a certain extent, in our heritage, there is this idea that the tzaddik acts and lifts everyone up on his coattails to a certain extent. There are things that he does that no one else can do. So it's not such a foreign idea. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is especially that way. The Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKadosh on Yom Kippur. So what does that do with the rest of us? The answer is exactly. But the Kohen Gadol is not doing this for himself. He is doing this as a representative of the tzibur, as a representative of the entire nation. And when he goes into the Holy of Holies, he is in a sense taking us with him. We're also elevated. It's something which I think we have to digest a little bit. But that's the goal. What we want to achieve in Yom Kippur is that elevation. We want to go to that place we've never been. And by elevating ourselves to that place, we can leave a lot of baggage behind. A lot of baggage behind. And that's really the process of self-improvement. And that's why, of all the aspects of the avodah on Yom Kippur, I think this is first and foremost, this is the most important thing. But just to spice it up a little bit, let me mention another aspect of the avodah of Yom Kippur. It's very interesting, which is the soyer hamishtalayach. Because we know that there is a goat which is sent off. And it says, V'nasa hasoyer olov, that the goat carries on its back, so to speak, as kol avonosam, all the sins of the Jewish people. What is this idea that the goat carries off the Jewish sins? So listen to what the Medrash says. We know that the Hebrew word for goat is a so'ir. Now, why is the word so'ir the term for a goat? So'ir means hair. Sar is hair. The difference between a goat and a sheep is that a sheep has wool and a goat has hair. Essentially, a goat is really a sheep that has hair instead of wool. That's why it's called a so'ir. Its noteworthy feature is that it has hair. Now, who in Jewish history was called Seir is Esav. Esav was called the hairy one. We know when he was born he had a full head of hair. Kulo kadera Seir. So Esav came to be known as Seir. Yaakov in the Chumash is called Ish Tom. The perfect, the pure, untainted son. So it says in the pasuk, "V'nasa hasoir olav es kol avono som," that the soir Esav, carries avono som, avonos tam. He carries off the sins of Yaakov, who's called the Yishtam, the perfect man. So somehow the Midrash sees in this story of the scapegoat, so to speak, Esav carrying off the sins of Yaakov. How do you understand that? Are sins transferable? I said many times, I think even in this class we've talked about it, that the only way to understand this is by making reference to the famous story. Which story? By Robert Louis Stevenson of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, if you're not familiar with the story, this really was the issue in the story, that Dr. Jekyll was doing research, and he came to an understanding that every person really has a mixture of good and evil within him. And hopefully, in most instances, the good suppresses the evil. In some instances, the evil overpowers the good, but generally, most people are a mixture. So he invented a potion which could enable a person to separate himself into two halves. There'd be the good half, and the evil half would emerge. And of course, the man of all good Victorian scientists, he tested this on himself, and the evil half that emerged was Mr. Hyde. And Mr. Hyde committed a couple of very hideous murders, and it was just a very, very terrible thing. And finally, in the end of the story, what happens is that the potion that could bring the two halves together, he could no longer reproduce. So Mr. Hyde was on the loose, and they couldn't bring him back, and whatever, the story unfolds. And the point is, every person has a little bit of Yaakov and a little bit of Esav in him. So what does it mean that the goat takes the sins? It means that we divest ourselves of the Esav. Now, normally it's difficult to separate the two. Right? The good and evil within us is bound together. But on Yom Kippur, we have this ability to divest ourselves. That's the sending away of the goat. We're sending the Esav away from ourselves. How do we have that ability to divest ourselves of the evil? To the extent that we elevate the good, so we become disconnected from the evil can now just be sent away and divested. Okay, that's the first half. I think of the significance of the idea of the Kohen Gadol going to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It's symbolic of what we are meant to do on Yom Kippur, which is elevate ourselves to a higher place. There's also another aspect to it. And it says in Sefer Chasidus that Aaron being allowed to go to the Kodesh HaKadoshim symbolizes the esteem in which God holds the Baal Tshuva. Chazal tell us, "B'makom shebalei tshuva oimdim, ein tzadik gomer yochel lamed." In the place that a penitent person stands, the people that are perfectly righteous cannot stand. That, in some sense, for reasons that we'll perhaps try to understand, the Baal Tshuva is in higher esteem than the Tzadik Gomer. Now, I just want to tell you, by the way, that when Chazal speak of Baal Tshuva, they're not speaking about what we colloquially call Baal Tshuva. They're talking about a person who has really sinned and is repenting. Not a person who may have no Jewish background or not have been raised in Jewish practice. That's a totally different story. Colloquially, such a person is called a Baal Tshuva, but it's really not technically the same thing. In other words, the person who is a newcomer to Jewish practice is not considered as having ever sinned. He probably, or she probably, is closer to the Tzadik Gomer than one would think. Because this person never knew what Judaism expects. So it's not as if the person succumbed to an evil urge or gave into a Yetzer Hara. The person perhaps knew no better. And we're talking about a real sinner. A real sinner, a person who's done terrible, terrible, terrible things, knowing that they're improper, and now is turning over a new leaf. That's the Baal Tshuva, as Chazal used the term. And even that person is in higher esteem in God's eyes than the person who never sinned. To convey that idea on Yom Kippur, when we all are Baalei Tshuva, we all are penitent people, so Aaron can go into the Holy of Holies. He can go to a place where the Tzaddik and Gemurim can't go. Only the Baalei Tshuva on Yom Kippur. And this, by the way, let me just mention, I'm talking about Baalei Tshuva. Really, the story relates to the other sense of the word, but it's a cute story. That there once was a boy, he was studying in Rosh in Eretz Yisrael, and he was walking in the street in Geula, Meir Sharm, that area, and the Gera Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael, the base Yisrael, was also going for a walk. And when he would go for a walk, he would talk to people he'd bump into on the street. So he bumped into this boy, so he asked the boy, "Where do you go to Yeshiva?" He said, "I go to Rosh Hashanah, but I'm not a Baal Tshuva." So he says, "Why not?" "Aren't you a Baal Tshuva?" And so the Beis Yisrael once said like this. He said that there were two great movements in the Jewish world in the 20th century. He was nifter in the 20th century. There were two great movements. One was the movement to Eretz Yisrael, and the other was tshuva. So he said like this. He said, "Eretz Yisrael haben the Tzionim gehabt." He says, the love of Israel, that was snatched away by the secular Zionists. He says, "Und tshuva haben the Freie gehabt. And Tshuva was snatched away by the irreligious. Right? In other words, each of those should have found their place in the mainstream. That the love of Eretz Yisrael should have been something that the religious Jews had, and Tshuva also should have been part of the life of a religious Jew. But every person has to be a Baal Tshuva. So he said that Eretz Yisrael haben the Tzionim gehabt. Eretz Yisrael was snatched away by the secular Zionists, and Tshuva had the Freie gehabt, and Tshuva was snatched away by the non-religious Jews. And it's a sad commentary, but the truth is that all of us, even those of us in the religious mainstream, need to reinforce our love of Eretz Yisrael and need to reinforce our commitment to the ideal of Tshuva. But in any case, in God's eyes, the Baal Tshuva is held to a very, very he's put on a high pedestal. Now let me talk about that for a little bit. The parsha begins with God speaking to Moshe, Acharei Mot-Kedoshim bnei Aaron, after the death of the two sons of Aaron. This story is told a few weeks ago, Parsha Shmini, that on the day of the dedication of the Mishkan, the two sons of Aaron took incense and they offered the incense improperly, and as a result, fire came forth from the Holy of Holies and consumed them. What exactly their sin was is a matter of debate in Chazal. But the Ibn Ezra, in this week's Parsha, says that the simple meaning of the verses in this week's Parsha seem to indicate that they went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, they went into the Holy of Holies. Because that's what the Torah seems to say, that after the death of the two sons of Aaron, God warned Aaron, don't go into the Holy of Holies except on the following conditions. So what's the connection of this warning not to go into the Holy of Holies to the death of the two sons of Aaron? So the Ibn Ezra says the simple interpretation of the verses is that the two sons of Aaron went into the Holy of Holies, that was the sin. They went beyond the place they should have gone, and therefore Aaron is warned, beware, be careful. Don't do what they did. You're going to come to the Holy of Holies only at a specified time and only in a specified way. You can't just come in like they came in. That's what Ibn Ezra says. Well, let's understand a little bit about the difference between Aaron and Nadav and Avihu. There's why Nadav and Avihu paid with their lives for going into the Holy of Holies, and why Aaron, albeit under very carefully defined conditions, is allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. So let's hear an amazing thing. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that when Moshe and Aaron would go walking, Nadav and Avihu would follow them and say, Mosai Yomusu Shnei Zekanim Halolu. When are these two old men going to pass on? And we can take over. That's what it says. Now, all the commentators are troubled. I mean, this can't be literal. I mean, this is something that, let's just say, even if you think it, you never say it. Like when are the two old men gonna kick the bucket and make room for us? I mean, it makes no sense. The Sfasema says that Nadav and Avihu were tremendous tzaddikim. In fact, Rashi says in Parsha Shmini that Moshe told Aaron that Nadav and Avihu were bigger than you and I. Moshe told Aaron that Nadav and Avihu were bigger tzaddikim than you and I. So if Moshe said it, probably it was true. We should take his word for it. The Nadav and Avihu were tremendous, tremendous tzaddikim. And undoubtedly, what they were thinking was that Moshe and Aaron are leading the people in a certain way, But when our time comes, we will lead the people in a higher way. We will raise the people to a higher level. Our hanhaga, our leadership, will raise the Jewish people to an even higher spiritual plane than the leadership of Moshe and Aaron. That's what they held. That's interesting. There's a little sefer called Siach Sarfei Kodesh. It's a story book. It tells stories of the Rebbes, witty things that they said. It tells a Maisa that a certain Yid once came to the Chidushei Arim, the first Ger Rebbe, and asked that what is the meaning of this story that Nadav and Avihu said that when will Moshe and Aaron have such a thing that they should want that their father and uncle should die, that they should take over. So the Chidushei Arim was telling this conversation over to someone, that he had this conversation, the person asked him this question. And the Chidushei Arim said, their grubber, this coarse person, right, couldn't understand. He said, the interpretation is so simple. He says, for the benefit of Klal Yisrael, he says, of course. If they really held that their leadership would have brought Klal Yisrael to a higher level, then of course that's what they should want. That's what the Chashirim said. The amazing thing. But this is what Nadav and Avihu said. Nadav and Avihu thought that they could bring Klal Yisrael to a higher level. So, in what way were Nadav and Avihu greater than Moshe and Aaron? So listen to this amazing thought the Sfas Emes says. The Sfas Emes says like this, that the sin of Nadav and Avihu is also described in the Torah as their having brought incense that they were not commanded to bring. They were not commanded to bring. It doesn't say they were commanded not to bring it. They were commanded not to bring it. Now what's wrong with that? If it wasn't prohibited, so good they weren't commanded to bring it. Why is that sinful? So we explained many times that, as a rule, if the Torah doesn't forbid something, you can assume it's permitted. If there's no explicit verse, statement in the Shulchan Aruch that it's prohibited, you can assume it's permitted. Except in the temple, which is God's place, you have to be extra cautious. There you have to assume that unless you're told it's permitted, it's prohibited. Here you're walking on eggshells. You have to be very careful in the temple. But great tzaddikim have an intuition. They have an intuition as to what's right and what's wrong. Now this is a very, very, very deep thing. Let's understand this very deeply. Now, we all have a moral sense. We have a gut feeling of what's right and what's wrong. You see something happen and you feel that this is right, or you feel this is an injustice. We all have this intuition. Sometimes we can't even explain why. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I know that this is wrong. This should not happen. This should not go on. Where does that come from? Where does that come from? The philosophers call this natural law, that natural intuition we have as to what is right and what is wrong. Where does that come from? Well, the natural law philosophers believe it also came from God. Since God made our souls, He implanted in our souls an intuition as to what is right and what is wrong. To the extent that we might not be able to articulate or even understand what's right and what's wrong, but we have a gut feeling that this is appropriate, this is inappropriate. Forgive me for giving the irreverent mashal, but I think it was Felix Frankfurter was a justice on the Supreme Court, and there was a case. The question was that the Supreme Court has ruled all the time that pornography is not considered protected speech under the U.S. Constitution. States, the federal government have the right to ban it. But it's always a question of definition. What is considered pornographic? So Felix Frankfurter once said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Right? Which is a very, very deep idea. That sometimes we have an intuition as to what is right and what is wrong, what is appropriate and not appropriate. We can't explain why. It defies logic. We can't, but we feel it. Chazal say that malachim are like this. That angels are exactly like this. It says the malachim are Baruch Hu Hashem malachim. Bless God, O angels. Giborei kayach, mighty of strength. Osei devaro, who do God's will, lishmaya b'kol devaro, in order to understand God's word. They do it in order to understand it. Now, how can that be? How do you do it in order to understand it? As Nancy Pelosi once said, you have to pass the law in order to see what's in it. It makes no sense. I mean, you do it in order to understand it. It's just exactly that. The Malachim have this intuition. It's part of their makeup. They understand what they're meant to do. They can't understand why. But they know, this is what I have to do. They do it, and from the doing it, they come to understand. Chazal say this was the level of Klal Yisrael before the Chet HaEgel. When they said Nasa v'nishma, we will do and then we'll understand, it was just like the Malachim who are Osei Devaro Lishmaya B'Kol Devaro. They were on such a lofty level as a consequence of that lofty experience at Har Sinai that they had a gut feeling as to what is right, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. They couldn't understand why. They couldn't articulate it, but they knew in their bones what is right and what is wrong, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. And from doing it, then they could perhaps understand it. That's Nasa v'nishma. We'll do, and then we'll understand. That's the madrega they were at. After the Chet HaEgel, Klal Yisrael plummeted. Klal Yisrael fell to a very, very low level. They were on a level where they could no longer rely on that intuition, and now they had to be told what to do, understand it, and then do it. But Nadav and Avihu, says the Sfasemas, were on that level. They were on that level of before the Chet HaEgel. That means that they were not tainted by the Chet HaEgel. They were on that level of Malachim. And therefore, they held they could rely on their intuition. If we have a sense, we have a gut feeling that bringing this incense, going to the Holy of Holies is appropriate, we have the right to assume this is God's will. And they acted upon that intuition. Says the Sfasemas that really they weren't wrong. They really weren't wrong. They really were right. So why were they punished? They were punished because if other people would follow their example, it could be catastrophic. Because the Jews weren't on that level that they could follow their intuition. And therefore, God had to take them away, not because they did something wrong according to their level, but they did something which, if others would imitate, would be catastrophic, and therefore they had to be taken away. That's what the Sasema says. An amazing, amazing interpretation. We see Nadav and Avihu were tremendous tzaddikim. They were untainted by the Chet HaEgel. That the rest of Klal Yisrael dropped precipitously, but Nadav and Avihu were untainted. Tzaddikim. Aaron himself was implicated in the Chet HaEgel, to the extent that when Aaron was made the high priest, it says in Parashat Shemini that Aaron was told to approach the Mizbeach and start bringing the sacrifices. He was embarrassed to do so. He was ashamed. He says, how could I was such a sinner? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, go. Lekach nivcharta. That's why you were chosen. The Sfasemas explains that what God really loves is the Baal Tshuva. That's what He loves. This is precisely because you sinned, because you made a mistake, because you recovered from that, you elevated yourself. That's why you were chosen to be the high priest. Rav Tzadok HaKayin writes that even though Chazal say it, that the Baal Tshuva is held in greater esteem than the Tzaddik Gomer, and we all believe in Chazal, but this is one of those things that no one really, really believes. Yeah, Chazal say it. Yeah, Chazal. But in our thinking, no one really believes that the Baal Tshuva is more precious to the Rebbeinu Shalom than the Tzaddik Gomer. No one can understand that. We all think that the Tzaddik Gomer, the person is perfectly righteous, the person who never sinned. That is really beautiful. And okay, it's damaged goods. Right? Chazal say it, but there are many things like that. There are things that, we know on one level they're true, but deep, we don't feel it deeply. We don't feel that it's really so. And that could be Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu held that their hanhaga, their leadership, was much loftier than the leadership of Moshe and Aaron. Because Moshe and Aaron, their leadership promoted the ideal of the Baal Tshuva. And Nadav and Avihu, their leadership would promote the ideal of the Tzaddik Gomer. Because Nadav and Avihu themselves were, as we said, they were untainted even by the Acharei Mot. They were pure, they were clean, they were unblemished. And therefore they held that we will raise Klal Yisrael to a higher level. We will lead them to perfection. And Moshe and Aaron are leading them in a way which says that you can sin, you can do tshuva, it's also good. But it's not as good as what we would do. But in fact, it's the opposite. Because Chazal do teach us that. That the hanhaga of Moshe Rabbeinu, the hanhaga of Aaron, the beauty of the Baal Tshuva is greater, is a loftier vision than the vision of Nadav and Avihu. Right? Nadav and Avihu, from their perspective, thought that their vision for Klal Yisrael, that Klal Yisrael should be a nation which accepts nothing less than perfection, that would be the highest aspiration of Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron held up a conception of Klal Yisrael that a person could be even more beloved to the Rebbeinu Shalom for having had the experience of sin. So how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu demonstrate the fact that Moshe and Aaron's vision is superior to Nadav and Avihu? That where Nadav and Avihu weren't allowed to go, Aaron was allowed to go. And in the Holy of Holies, the innermost place, the holiest place, Nadav and Avihu couldn't go. That's why they were taken from this world, because they went to that place. That's the place where Aaron goes. Because Mokum Shabbalei Tshuva, Aaron is the exemplar of the Baal Tshuva, where he is allowed to go, even Nadav and Avihu, who exemplified the Tzaddik and Gemurim, who were untainted even by the Chet HaEgel, they were not allowed to go. And this is an amazing, amazing thing. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds us in esteem. Now, the hour is late, but just to perhaps bring this a little bit down to earth, right? Why is the Baal Tshuva so? How is the Baal Tshuva more precious than the Tzaddik Gomer? I mean, is there any way to understand that? Yeah.
Is it the discrepancy, the distance between knowing that you're missing the mark on the one hand, and on the other, you're giving up? It's almost like a self-sacrifice. Emotions. It's like a separation of purity, but it's leading you into the infinite.
See, that may be part of it, but let me just say something very down to earth, very practical thought.
I got a reason.
That will perhaps bring us closer to understanding. Let's say you have a Tzaddik Gomer. This person is an absolutely righteous person. He's never done anything wrong in his life.
Yeah.
Now, that may be true. He's never done anything wrong. But does that mean that his personality is perfectly refined? Does that mean that his desires are perfectly... even the Tzaddik and Gemurim have temptations, they have nisyonos, they have challenges, and maybe they even have flaws which they can overcome. Dr. Jekyll overcomes Mr. Hyde. Right? The Tzaddik Gomer means that in terms of his actions, he is absolutely perfect. He's never done anything wrong in his entire life. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have perhaps maybe a slight character flaw. when a person sins, what happens? It's not just the sin that he does. The sin that he does reveals to him the underlying flaw. Now he understands. He understands, okay, I did a sin. It's bad enough to have done this sin, but why did I do this sin? I did the sin because there's some imperfection, there's some flaw, there's some personality trait, there's something which is amiss. And in this instance, I wasn't able to suppress it, I wasn't able to control it. It overcame me, and I committed the sin. Now when he does tshuva, what happens? Not only does he desist from doing the sin, but he finally grapples and deals with the underlying flaw. So really, he's greater than the tzaddik gomer. The tzaddik gomer, the person who never did anything wrong, right, could be a ticking time bomb. We're not joking, right? It just happens to be he never sinned. I'll give you an example from Tanakh. You know, there was a David HaMelech had a son, Adoniyahu. And when David HaMelech got old, there was a question of who his successor should be. So David HaMelech wanted that his son Shlomo should be the successor. Adoniyahu was jockeying for position, and he should be the successor. And the story unfolds. But it says that about Adoniyahu, it says that David HaMelech never saddened him by giving him rebuke. That as he was a boy, David HaMelech never rebuked him. He never made him sad. Lo atzava aviv miyamav leimar lo kacha asisa. He never rebuked him. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? He never gave him musar. He never disciplined him. And as a result, later in life, when he was tempted, he did terrible things. So the question was asked, so why was it, in fact? Why did David HaMelech never give him musar? Why did David HaMelech never rebuke him? It's a good question.
Yeah. What was in him?
The answer is very simple. The answer is because he was perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
He was a perfect child. In other words, he never did anything wrong. There never was an occasion to rebuke him.
Wow.
He was studious and he was polite and he was well mannered. He was a perfect child. There never was an occasion to rebuke him. But beneath the surface, there was this flaw. Call it ambition, call it pride, whatever it was. It never emerged. So there never was an occasion for David HaMelech to rebuke him. But when the occasion emerged, then catastrophe. Right, that's an important thing to understand. The tzaddik gomer can be, in a sense, a ticking time bomb. Right? He's a perfect person because he's a master of self-control and self-discipline. But has he really changed himself? Has he transformed himself? Has he perfected himself? The Baal Tshuva, precisely because the flaw has emerged, and not only does he repent of the sin, but he grapples with the underlying flaw. That's why he's on a higher level even than the tzaddik gomer. Yeah.
Are we judged on our growth? The Baal Tshuva, he's made some serious growth, but the tzaddik, his growth is, there's not that much he can grow anymore. He's ready at the top already, so he can refine what he's doing a little bit.
See, there are two different issues over here. There's two different issues. The issue you're raising is in terms of reward. So, you can make a very strong argument that the person who's overcome adversity is more deserving of reward than the person who's had it easy, right? But Chazal is saying something different. Chazal is saying, in terms of the level of who's on a higher madrega, the Baal Tshuva is still a higher level than the tzaddik gomer. That's a hard thing to understand. Let me give you an example. In other words, let's say you have two people, right? One of them has overcome great odds. Maybe he's overcome learning disabilities, and nevertheless he worked very, very hard, and he struggled through school, and ultimately became a doctor. The other person was, Baruch Hashem, he was blessed with an excellent mind, and everything came easy to him, and he also became a doctor. Now there's two questions. Who is more deserving of praise? Certainly the first more than the second. It says, who would you rather hire to be your doctor?
Same level.
Different question. Different
but
question. Why? Because now it's not a question of who's more deserving of praise. The question is who's the better doctor, right? Which may be a different set of considerations. You see, you're 100% right that of course, in terms of reward and punishment, reward considerations, of course, the Baal Tshuva is more deserving of reward than the Tzaddik Gomer. The Tzaddik Gomer, everything came easy to. The Baal Tshuva had to work hard, right? So you're right, in terms of schar, reward, that goes without saying. But Chazal is saying something else. When Chazal say that they're not just saying that the Baal Tshuva is more deserving of reward. They're saying that he's at a higher level, which is harder to understand. So what I'm trying to say is that the reason he's at a higher level is because the Baal Tshuva rectifies the underlying faults, whereas the Tzaddik Gomer doesn't necessarily do that. Since he's so perfect in his practice, he may never come to grapple with those very, very deep, slumbering problems. Yeah.
This rectification, is it a higher level of thought, practice, and a separation out of one's base instincts, desires?
It involves a fundamental transformation of the person. The person's desires, the person's personality. Right? There's essential change, not just change in terms of what you do, but change what you are.
Is it the idea of purity is a separation from the impure to something else, wool and cloth, disease and health. I was reading the Rambam's codes. He was talking about that.
You can use any metaphor you want, or just say this: that the person who's exemplary in practice doesn't necessarily grapple with the issues of desire, personality, temptation. You know, he does the right thing because he has good self-control and he has a good knowledge base, so he knows what he's meant to do, and he does it. Right? In other words, the real transformation in terms of personality and character, that the Baal Tshuva may have achieved much, much more than the Tzaddik Gomer. That's precious to the Ribono Shel Olam. But that's the idea. The difference in Aaron and Nadav and Avihu is really this, and that's why Aaron can go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and Nadav and Avihu aren't allowed to go. That's the question.
It almost sounds like Chazal is suggesting or inferring that maybe we got to try something out to see if we can grow a little more. You almost could infer that if you have a desire and you haven't tried it out,
no, you
try it out, maybe you'll bring out the...
You never want to try sin. Right? You never want to try sin for the simple reason that God told you not to. I mean, in a sense, that's what Adam Harishon did in Gan Eden. Right? God told him, don't eat from the Eitz HaDaas. And he calculated, no, if I eat from the Eitz HaDaas and I have temptation, I'll be better able to serve the Rosh by overcoming it. Of course, that was a catastrophe that we suffer from to this very day. Because you have to do the right thing. You have to do what God tells you to do. But after the fact, if a person already has sinned, right, there are opportunities which may exist for him, which he would not have had he not sinned. Right? There are many things in life like that. You don't opt for them, but once you have them, you should savor them. Make the most out of them. Okay, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.